Hello, everybody. This is my reading wrap up for November 2024 because I am all caught up, and I think so is everybody else because my last videos, I guess, reminded others that they were subscribed to me, so they've unsubscribed. So, yeah, we're all caught up together. It's great. It's wonderful. I read 2 books in full this month, and I DNF'd 2 of them, but despite having 2 DNFs, I feel like the 2 books that I read from front to back in November were knockouts. I will remember them moving forward for sure. And as for the 2 that I DNF'd, I kind of DNF'd them for the same reason. So I'm going to get into the first DNF first, which was Tell No One by Harlan Coben. I was disappointed to DNF this book because I read Don't Let Go last year, and I'm not going to sit here and bullshit the premise because I don't really remember the premise for Tell No One, unfortunately. I do think that there was a similar theme to Don't Let Go, and what's interesting is that when I was reviewing Don't Let Go, or leaving a review on Goodreads for Don't Let Go, I did look through some other reviews who said that Harlan Coben seemed to have kind of the same theme across a lot of his books, if not all of them. And I do remember picking up on a similar theme with Tell No One, where the main character was trying to figure out this mystery surrounding his significant other. I just don't remember. I feel like she might have died, and he didn't believe it, maybe, and now he's trying to seek the truth around that. But like I said, I'm not going to BS you. I don't really remember the premise. I just remember that Harlan Coben tended to dip into stereotypes with people of color in this book, which I did not appreciate. And what was interesting is something that I picked up about the main character, whose name I also unfortunately don't remember. I think his last name was Beck, because that was another issue where his name was Beck, there was a character named Peck, and then there was a character named Rebecca, and having similar sounding names was a bit confusing for me. But yeah, there were some scenes in this book where Beck, who was, I believe, an OBGYN. If he wasn't an OBGYN, he was a doctor of some sort, where he would talk about, not stereotyping people and this and that, not coming to assumptions based on a person's skin color. And then the person with that specific skin color or that ethnicity would do something stereotypical, which brings me into Color Me In by Natasha Diaz, who had a very similar problem. But I remember more of this story's premise because I got deeper into it and I was much more invested. This is the story of Nevaeh, who is a biracial girl, teenage girl, who is caught between her mom's side of the family, who is black, and her dad's side of the family, who is white and Jewish. They're divorced, and there's a bit of a tug of war, I guess, back and forth between these 2 identities and what she's expected to do, what's expected out of her. But yeah, so she's torn between these 2 sides since they're divorced. And of course, on one side, her blackness is put into question, where she's not black enough. She is white passing. She checks her privilege at the door for being a white passing individual. But then on the other side, there are racist white people who pick out her otherness, in air quotes, and use that against her and basically deliver a bunch of cheap shots her way. So she's having to deal with that. I appreciate books around kind of, I don't know, this identity crisis theme. And while I'm not biracial, I am adopted, and it's something that adoptees tend to go through a lot. So whether I'm reading about adoptees or individuals who have multiple identities that define themselves, I really appreciate that sort of book about discovering who you are. While her mom's side of the family, Corinne, And we got a little bit of a backstory into Corinne and how she and her husband met as well. I can't remember the husband's name. I can't remember the man's name, the dad. But her name's Corinne. I liked her quite a bit, but the dad was useless. I did not like the dad. I did not like who he ended up with after the divorce. And this is where we run into stereotypes. Natasha Diaz tended to play on those a little bit too heavily. There was the sassy black woman at church. But then the woman that Nevaeh's father ended up with was the stereotypical ditzy blonde. In fact, I think a lot of the white female characters were kind of the same stereotype. While there's very important commentary on racism and otherism and colorism in this novel, I think you start to lose your message when you begin to just throw in random stereotypes. I think with Harlan Coben, Tell No One was written in the early 2000s. I hope that things have changed because Don't Let Go did not have this issue. But I do believe that Color Me In is Natasha Diaz's debut. And I hated that I DNF'd it because it was based on a lot of her experiences. So, this isn't a question of that. It's just that I wish that authors would stop relying so much on stereotypes to deliver a message. Because stereotypes are easy, guys. Like, they're so easy. They're like the low-hanging fruits. We don't want to do that. We want to make our characters nuanced. We want to make them human. We want to give them the good and the bad. And we want to deliver teachable moments in a very meaningful, successful way. So moving into the books that I did read from front to back, the first one is Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. This was a blast to read. And it's crazy. It was so cool how Chuck Tingle was able to turn this story on its head so many times where I was like, okay, even though I was listening to the audiobook, I knew it wasn't finished, but I thought that things were winding down or that maybe there was a different part of the story where, a resolution was just around the corner. No, that happened like 4 times where I was just bamboozled by another action-packed scene, and it worked so well. Though I know that sometimes that sort of thing doesn't work. It gets a little chaotic and a bit confusing, but I feel like in this case, for whatever reason, it did work and it kept me interested. But just like Alyssa Cole with When No One Is Watching, these horror authors, I really appreciate when they're able to throw in elements that take your guard down and make you feel maybe not necessarily safe, but they are still able to provide that unexpected punch. And I feel like both Alyssa Cole and Chuck Tingle were able to do that in their books. One I read last month, and then this one, of course, I read this month, or October, November. But anyway, I didn't talk about the premise. This is about the algorithm and how the LGBTQ is used as a trend. We're used as a way to promote movies and TV shows and get sales and get money, and people capitalize on our sexuality, and it's just weird. In this case, the main character Misha, the producers, they want him to kill off his beloved gay characters, and he refuses to do that, but not without consequences, because once he refuses to do that, he has to fight his past, and in a very creative way, I'll say, kind of an unexpected twist of a way. Chuck Tingle in this novel, it's kind of like two sides of the same coin. He covers the bad and how Hollywood and these television studios, they capitalize on the LGBTQ for what they think is a good reason, but whatever makes them profitable. It's not about, writing what you want to write. It's about writing what sells. And I think that applies to books as well. He did a great job of explaining that and explaining how harmful it is. And he included some flashbacks of Misha as a child watching TV and wanting there to be characters who were just like him or who thought like him. And the way that he approached those scenes were, for such a, I don't want to call this a silly book because it's not, a silly book. The message is definitely not silly. It's very true. But this was a fun book. It was really tense, really intense, and it was a fun read. But I think he took so much care, especially with these flashback scenes. Um, it was just so outrageously realistic. I don't know how else to describe it. It was just really good. Um, and so when I got to the end of the book, or as I was getting to the end of the book, I was just like, yes, this is just right. There was so much right in this book, and people may disagree. That's fine, but I certainly got a kick out of it. Moving on to the next book that also received a 5-star rating, but for different purposes. Beasts of No Nation by Uzodimma Iwala. I said his name, so you probably know if you listened to my reviews last year, because I read one of his books and one of his short stories. His books are difficult. They are hard to swallow. They are tough reads. They are brutal. They are triggering. I would not recommend this book for anyone unless you are in the right mental space. Still gave it 5 stars because I thought it was spectacularly written despite how difficult it was to read. It triggered me. One scene was difficult for me in a way that I did not expect it to be difficult. I feel like I said that about Speak No Evil last year as well, where there was something that flipped a switch in my brain that hit me really hard in a very unexpected way. It happened again. I feel like this is just going to be a pattern if I continue to pick up his books. I don't know how big his backlist is, though. I think it's relatively small. So, if he comes out with something new, I guess I'll read it. Or I can check his backlist and see if there's anything else. But this is the story of Agu, a child who is roped into a brutal, devastating West African civil war. He, like I said, he's a child soldier. He is ripped of his innocence. But the way that Iwala wrote him is that his innocence is still there, and you were seeing these gory, horrific scenes through his eyes, through this child's eyes, which I thought was so well done, where he's questioning, why are we attacking these civilians? Why are we brutalizing them? Why aren't we fighting soldiers? Why are these my fellow soldiers, like my allies, I guess? Why are they laughing? Why are they having such a good time when all of this bloodshed is happening around us? And then he goes back to his barracks and he has to deal with those men that he just served with, and just deals with unspeakable things that children, they don't have to go through, or they shouldn't have to go through. It's hard, it's tough, and the way that Iwala wrote Agu's voice is so powerful in this book. It's almost poetic. There was something that I picked out that I thought was so unique. It was the way that Iwala wrote Agu's internalizations, where he doubled words up. I can't remember if he did this in dialogue too, but I do remember it in the basic narration where words would be written twice. And in some cases, maybe that could be a distraction for some people, but for me, the way that he repeated those words back to back twice, it pulled me into the story a lot more and what was being thought, like what were the thoughts, what was happening as he was just witnessing all of it. It was just so unique. it was such a unique voice. I haven't read that much. Like, I'm not an avid reader. I don't read hundreds of books a year like other booktubers, but I don't ever remember prose like this. Like, I can't think of a book that I could compare this to, if that makes sense. Even Iwala's other books and short stories, I don't think I can compare this to them. Outside of the impact that it has, the way that it's like, oh my gosh, like this actually happens, actually goes on, and this poor child could be a real person, and you're looking through a real child's perspective. It's hard. It's a hard book. It's a tough book. Like I said, 5-star read that I wouldn't recommend unless you were in the right mental space, because this is tough. And that's how you have to be with all of Iwala's books. However, if you are ready to read this, and I've convinced you to, the Goodreads link to Beasts of No Nation, as well as all the other books that I talked about today, are in the description below. Click on those, head on over to the retailer of your choice and purchase them if you're feeling brave, or go to your local library or use your library app if they are available. If you enjoyed this video for whatever reason, do leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Otherwise, I've been Jim. You've been great. Happy reading.